Hi, readers. So, I am so proud of the work you guys did in our nonfiction research unit. Your animal real life problem solving projects were amazing. I am so proud of the work you did. So, we are starting a new unit for reading, and we are still continuing to read nonfiction. But this time, we're reading a different type of nonfiction text. Instead of reading informational or expository nonfiction books like this, the ones that we've been reading, the typical when you think of nonfiction, we're going to change to reading narrative nonfiction, and focusing on biographies. Now, narrative nonfiction books read more like a story rather than expository or informational nonfiction books. So you're going to put on your story minds, but still understand that we're reading nonfiction, but we're going to get ready to focus on biographies. So readers use different ways of reading depending on the nonfiction text. So today I'm going to teach you that readers of nonfiction stories use their knowledge of how stories tend to go, remember that story mountain, to organize their understanding of a text. And I'm really excited because we are going to be reading together Who is Malala Yousafzai? And this is a true story about a young woman. Now, before we dive into a book, we know that readers need to rev up their minds for reading nonfiction. Now, this anchor chart that I'm about to pull up probably looks familiar because we've done this type of nonfiction work before, but this time it's a little bit different, and I have added a bullet point, specifically this one. Before we dive into a nonfiction book, now we need to think, what sort of text is this? Is this a narrative nonfiction book or an expository? Now, we're going to be reading this book. And when you take a look, like I said, it looks more like a story. So this is narrative nonfiction. Okay, after we do that, as you guys know, we need to take a look at the text features and think, what will these parts be about? What are the parts of the book? What are the subtopics? So together we have this book, and let's take a look into it. Who is Malala Yousafzai? Right away, I want you to take a look at the cover and think to yourself, what are you thinking? What are you wondering? Have you heard of this person before? Have you not heard of them? Are you wondering why is there a Who Was book about them or a Who Is book? It always helps to read the back too, so I'm going to read the back. A girl who risked her life for her beliefs. A fearless leader fighting for the education of millions. The youngest person ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize, or all of the above, which was checked. So right away, I'm hooked in, and I can tell that Malala Yousafzai is a prominent, important person. Now, remember, it's also really important to see if there is a table of contents, which there is. So remember, it's really important to preview the table of contents. So I see in the beginning, it's called the first chapter is called Who is Malala Yousafzai? And already thinking in my mind, that chapter is probably going to be like a little introduction to who she is. So before I read and start from the beginning of her life. Because the next chapter is A Girl is Born. So I'm assuming that chapter is then going to start from the beginning of life. And it looks like it keeps going. Born with Wings, At Home in Bangora, Dangerous Times. I'm interested to read that one. A Secret Diary, Who is Malala, All I Want is an Education, Every Woman, Every Boy, Every Girl, A Girl with a Book. Oh, and there's timelines and a bibliography at the end. Remember, it's important to look through. I'm already seeing some different text features. I'm seeing illustrations, but I'm also seeing things like maps. Oh, I see some pull-out boxes that give some additional information. Okay, awesome. And then we need to recall prior knowledge and build expectations. Now, I have read this book in the past, so I know a little bit about her. But right now, in your mind, I want you to recall any prior knowledge you have or any understanding if you have heard of her. And if you have not, maybe build an expectation. What do you think this book is going to be about? What are you excited to learn? Fantastic. All right, so now we're going to talk about how I would read this book different and process the information differently than if I was reading a regular expository or informational nonfiction text. Reading this is totally different than reading this. As I mentioned, this is like a story. So we're going to read about it and think about it like a story. So before we dive in, I want to talk about the mind work we need to be doing as we read this book. So it says amazing readers use all that they know about reading stories, regular stories. So think of like Stone Fox or Because of Winn-Dixie to help them read narrative nonfiction. Because even though this is a true story, it reads like a story. So it's really important as we read, we need to find the subject. Who is this book about? Which I'm already thinking Malala. What he or she wants, which we don't know yet. And what is getting in the way of what they want? What is the problem? We also need to study the actions and the daily actions of our subject and ask yourself, what does this tell me about them as a person? It's also really important to pause at different places where the author teaches us background info about who they are. And we need to think, what is this part mostly about? Okay. And something to help us is actually what we used in our fiction reading is our story elements. Okay, so again, we're going to think about the main character, her traits, her motivations and wants, the setting, and how the time and place adds to the story. Why is where she lives or where the story takes place so important? What is the problem? What are these obstacles or challenges? And most importantly, how do they respond to them? And the resolution, how do things end up? So let's practice this work together, readers, by reading the beginning of the book together. So again, this is called Who is Malala Yousafzai, and it's by Dina Brown. Who is Malala Yousafzai? When Malala Yousafzai was a little girl in Mingora, Pakistan, she decided to be a doctor when she grew up. Wow. Okay, so I'm already thinking in my mind. I know who my main character, who the story is about, is Malala. And I'm already on the signal. Okay, here's one setting, Pakistan. She decided to be a doctor when she grew up. She knew she would have to go to school for many years and study very hard. But Malala didn't mind at all. She loved everything about school. She loved reading. She loved history and geography and science. She loved studying religion. She enjoyed writing and reading stories aloud to her classmates. And again, this chapter is kind of like how I thought. It's kind of giving me a preview about who Malala is and what this book is going to be about. When her teacher talked about something new, she couldn't wait to learn more. Tests were difficult, but they were fun too, especially when she had studied hard and knew the answers. Then, when Malala was 10 years old, her life changed. War came to Mingora, the city where she lived. A group of violent fighters called the Taliban had taken over her beloved Swat Valley. They were saying that girls would soon be stopped from going to school. Not boys, just girls. Wow, let's pause here to take that in. Can you imagine girls and boys finding out that suddenly you can't go to school, but the boys can? For no reason. Just because. Oh, and I like how they give this text feature here. So I could see where she lives, Pakistan. The surrounding countries are India, Afghanistan, and Iran. That's in the Middle East, the other side of the world. You know what? This actually connects really good to the story we read about Kunkush and the cat. This is like the same part of the world. Remember how there was war and a lot of violence there. The Taliban started destroying girls' schools. The Pakistan army tried to stop them. Mingora became a war zone. It was very dangerous. People were afraid to go out. Are we signaling a problem already, right? So we have Malala. We know where this is taking place in Pakistan. And the problem right now is there's this terrorist group called the Taliban that is destroying schools and not allowing girls to go to school. Malala wondered how she could ever become a doctor if she wasn't allowed to learn. She wished there was something she could do to help keep her school open. Many were closed, and few students dared to go to the ones that were open. But Malala went to school every day. Wow, this is just the beginning of the book, and I'm already starting to tell about what kind of girl she is. I'm already thinking she's really brave because she's still going to school even though it's a war zone and incredibly dangerous. She's also really determined to learn. Malala spoke out. She told local newspapers that she was afraid the Taliban would close her school. She talked about how frightening her life had become. She said that more than anything, she wanted to go to school. Malala was becoming famous. People were talking about her. Some Taliban fighters learned her name and decided to take revenge. On October 9th, 2012, two of them stopped her school bus. One walked around to the back and looked inside. Then he shot Malala. Malala Yousafzai was lucky to survive. She was flown to a hospital where she recovered. Did she stop speaking out? No. Wow, again, she was shot and tried to be killed by these terrible people, and she still kept speaking out for what she believed. Think in your mind, what kind of person is she? When she was better, she went on working for the right of all children to be educated. But she never stopped learning and studying and going to school. On July 12, 2013, she addressed hundreds of young people at the United Nations Youth Assembly in New York City. "So here I stand, one girl among many," she said. "I speak not for myself, but for all girls and boys. I raise up my voice, not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard." Malala Yousafzai wanted one thing, an education. She spoke up, and people listened. Things began to change, little by little, until the whole world was listening. Okay, so remember, boys and girls, that was just the first chapter, which was like an introduction. Now, when we continue to read, the book is going to start from the beginning of her life. See how the chapter is called "The Girl is Born"? So, readers, I'm going to pause here for today. We will continue reading next time. Remember, as you read, we are now going to be reading narrative nonfiction books, biographies. And as we read, we need to read them like a story. Remember, look for the subject, what he, she wants, and what is getting in the way. Think about their actions. Look for background information. Think about the setting and the problems and the resolution. So, readers, today and moving forward until we change units, I want you reading biographies. On Epic, I assigned a whole bunch of biographies that you can read. If you have some biographies at home too, you can also read those. All right, readers, off you go.